Trudi Sharpsteen. I typically played center midfield, either offensive or defensive, depending on who is around me, and I do still play a bit today. We knew we were on the cutting edge of a really cool sport, but now that I look back and think about how girls and women's soccer has progressed since then, now I get it. And I have to say, I am so pleased to just see the progress of the sport. So yeah, at the time, I didn't necessarily know that we were doing the pioneering thing. I was right around 7 years old, and it was probably one of the first AYSO teams for girls in the South Bay. And I think my first team was the Mallards. My second team was the Sunflowers. We were able to dig this up. So this is 1972 to 73. And the Mallards was before that. So yeah, early 70s. When I first started playing in the first grade, I remember a boy in my first grade class, I think I said something like, I have soccer practice after class. And he said, girls don't play soccer. And I ran to my backpack and I pulled out my cleats, which you had to buy boys' cleats at the time, by the way, because there were no girls' cleats. And I said, yes, we do. And I was so proud of that moment to just kind of put my hands on my hips and say, yeah, we do what you do. The next year, actually, I got to go to a week-long overnight camp, and it was amazing what a difference it made to my learning experience. And from there, my career really took off, and it became a special sport for me. Age of 7 or even beyond, probably a couple of things. One of which is soccer to me is like a moving puzzle where you have to make quick decisions, much like kids do with video games today, and you have the opportunity to make the right decision or you make the wrong decision and you learn from it, kind of thing. And the other thing is, for me, my whole life, once I step onto the soccer field, whether it's practice or a game, everything else melts away. And so it is a release, can be an escape, depending on like what's going on in your world. And it just takes you to a really wonderful place where you can perform and try things and hang out with your girlfriends. The camaraderie factor is huge. Literally, it was advertised, and I talked about it with my sister and my mom, and I thought, yeah, I want to try that. And I was what somebody would call a tomboy back then. So I, used to do foot races with the boys in elementary school and things like that, and beat them plenty of times. And so I was just an athlete in some way, shape, or form from an early age, and that was always a thing for me. So really, as soon as I started touching the ball, I fell in love with the sport. And I would say that passion just grew the more I had experience with the sport, my teammates, winning, sometimes losing kind of thing. And it, bled over into the college experience for me. So I played at Cal, at Berkeley. And soccer was a huge part of my life there, both my social life as well as just the amount of time we played at the sport, training, et cetera. When I went to Cal in '82, it was literally just becoming a varsity sport or Division I sport. So it had shifted from club, and most college programs now are basically sanctioned varsity sports. Could be Division I, Division II, Division III. We had no money, and we were really trying to get ourselves on the radar of the NC2A because we wanted to go to the NC2A playoffs. We knew we were really good, and we were, for a while at least, kind of the dominant force in the West Coast as far as collegiate soccer went. And we had something to prove, and we, wanted to play, and go there, and we did end up actually going to the Final Four, where we lost in overtime 2-1. I think it was in 1984. Against UNC, University of North Carolina. You've heard the name Anson Dorrance, who was a prominent coach. But at that time, you were allowed to coach a college team plus the national team. So we had a lot of the national team players who just happened to go to UNC. So they were tough. But we felt like we were in the game, and we were all about, playing at the national level and getting out of our region and all that kind of stuff. The good news is it's much more evenly spread, and you don't tend to have, like in many sports, just one team dominating for years and years. But that just goes to how much various programs have grown, the fact that women's soccer in college now, because of Title IX, has grown significantly. And the beautiful thing is so many young girls have an opportunity to, go to college, get some financial help, and get to play the sport that they love. Because of my good friend Julie Foudy, who used to, may still be, affiliated with the Women's Sports Foundation, and Billie Jean King, just a reminder that Title IX wasn't all about sports. It was actually about equality in funding education for women. And it used to be that, women didn't get scholarships into things like engineering programs, and opportunities were really limited. So once that was settled on the education side, it sort of was natural that it would spill over into equality in sports. And so way back then, it was really a financial issue. The schools weren't forced to invest, but also maybe didn't even have the money to invest in, new and upcoming women's sports. So Title IX really helped even the playing field along those lines. One of the cool things about soccer is there is club soccer after college, and you can't say that about all sports. So the track after college was, to go back home or wherever you were living to play for a club, and the clubs would have regional playoffs, national playoffs kind of thing. In fact, I'll just share right now. So this is one of the teams that I played for in club in high school. And then after college, it's called FRAM, or Ajax was part of the FRAM club. And on this page is a list of all of the tournaments and the national regional titles that we won. So super successful club in Southern California. We have the opportunity to play in a really, really cool setting up in Palos Verdes. There's a place called Nansen Field, one of the probably might be the only private 15 acres of soccer field. It's just absolutely beautiful. We've got a whole, men's and women's club and youth organization built around it. So I went back to play for Ajax, and then the leagues got a little more sophisticated, which was a great thing. So we played in something called the WPSL, which is the Women's Premier Soccer League. So it was the first kind of semi-pro league, if you will. It was primarily in the West to start, and then we played in national tournaments as other areas grew. And then after the '99 World Cup, that's when we basically had our first professional soccer league, which was the Women's United Soccer Association, which was sort of forming in 2000, and I think our first games were in 2001. And there were some wonderful guys who basically invested, like they loved the 99er story and all the great energy around women's soccer at the time as a result of the World Cup here in Los Angeles. And there was a group of basically media investors who invested in WUSA. And so we had our first games in 2001, and that was like, you know, just the really big, cool thing for women's soccer. There was also the national team, which went to, you know, something on paper. They get patted on the back. Yeah, you're, you know, part of this regional, you know, pool on paper to, you know, finally becoming the national team that went to the, you know, Women's World Cup in 1991, where Karen Jennings, now Gabara, who I played with in Palos Verdes in high school. She's an amazing player, amazing person. She's now the coach at Annapolis and has been for decades. So she was the MVP of the 91 World Cup, and then it's just flourished ever since. So I played for a team called the San Diego Spirit with some of my friends and former foes. So Shannon Box was a youngster who played on Ajax with us, which I think was a big part of her development. In fact, let me just pull up and we do all kinds of fun things, our old group getting together. And this is just a fun shot of many of us who have played together for a long time. We do lots of parties and dinners over here. So this is just a fun shot of Shannon and a bunch of former Ajax players, Carrie Schmidt, Stephanie Poncher, and Vasey Kelly Odell. And we've, you know, we get to watch Boxy do commentating on the women's soccer games. She does a beautiful job on it. But you know, one of the many fringe benefits. But she played down in San Diego, Julie Foudy, Shannon McMillan, just a really fun, great group of people. So the teams that I think we really just had those, you know, you're going to get super, super stuck in kind of matches. What was when we played the Southern California Blues. There was also a team up in Northern California called the California Storm in the WPSL, where Julie Foudy played for them. They'd fly Brandy and Julie in at the end of the tournament where we're all super tired. You're like, oh my gosh, we have to play against these guys. Total respect for them, amazing players. But yeah, those tended to be knocked down, drag out. Everything was on the line. It was a final in a, you know, tournament in Las Vegas kind of thing. And we tended to bump up against them in the finals in the WPSL. I've had the privilege of playing with Joy Fawcett on Ajax and at Cal. For years and years, adore her, wonderful person, amazing soccer player. And by the way, if she could still be out playing today, she's had some ankle surgeries, she would be out there. She just loves the sport that much. But she made a comment to me that, you know, we didn't know when we were pulling up in the bus, we didn't know if there were going to be 9,000 people in the Coliseum or 90,000 people in the Coliseum. And there were 90,000 people. And I think that's when so many of us felt like women's soccer really made it. And then the game was just epic. So final came, you know, the final was against China. Rihanna Skirting made her amazing save at the end of the game. Brandy is clutch. Like, I have to give it to her. She's an incredibly talented player. And she is the one to step up and take a PK when everything's on the line. And she pulled it off. So it was just, the game itself was beyond exciting. Most of our Ajax team attended, and we were all in a row together. I looked across, and when the national anthem played, I don't think there was a dry eye, because we were just so proud. So Fram is forward in Norwegian, And kind of the cool, quick story is the club, the Palos Verdes, the 15 acres, that it originally belonged to the Kingdom of Norway because the Norwegian sailors way back in, I'm going to call it the 40s, I might not have that quite right, but, would chug over here on freighters or cargo ships for months, and then they'd get into the port of Los Angeles and they'd get into all kinds of trouble. So the King of Norway said, we're just going to go buy you some land up in this really remote place called Palos Verdes, and they built them a soccer field and clubhouse and locker rooms and all that kind of thing. And so it has become a Scandinavian center, and the biggest user group is the soccer teams. And so Ajax is affiliated with the club Fram, and there are quite a few youth teams affiliated with it now as well. Men's teams, they don't have a women's team right now, but yeah, a bunch of youth teams. So proud when I look at the women's national team, how diverse it is. And I would say that of our men's team as well, honestly. Soccer is an incredibly diverse sport. And, the best players, whether it's in the professional league, in the national teams, it should reflect that. And I think finally it does. It's a really interesting question. How did it get so big in Los Angeles? I do think, actually, the weather helps. Field space is actually harder to come by here than if you go to some other areas because it's so built up. So, getting fields and practice time and all that kind of stuff was always just a little on the tricky side. So I wouldn't say that was a huge contributor. But I do think whether it was the, NASL with a, local team here, George Best played, et cetera. And LA is a super diverse ethnic place. So I think a lot of that diversity sort of introduced it into the area. Some of our coaches were Brazilian, for instance, or Scottish, et cetera. And they contributed to women's soccer, to boys soccer, et cetera. So that's me thinking out loud, but I think that's a little bit of where it comes from. It's a good question. And what would be interesting is to understand, where did AYSO start, actually? I don't know the answer to that. I just know that the first girls team in the South Bay was probably right around the early 70s. And I think that's where so many kids get their start. And now they're peeling off to clubs earlier and earlier kind of thing, but still just the training ground for, putting a dough in the water and kids figuring out if they like it or not or have a passion. I actually didn't. Every once in a while we would go, when I was older, teenager, we would go down to the San Pedro field and watch some of the greater LA soccer leagues because we were starting to become friendly with the men's players and stuff like that. So, let's go catch each other's games. And I would say me personally, became more a student of the sport and wanting to watch, professional games as I was going into college and recognizing that I can learn from this kind of thing. But it is really helpful when you can watch somebody that looks like you. And we didn't have much of that until that first women's professional league. And at that time, it was, tricky to get TV rights and have the games aired and that kind of thing. So thankful for what is today the National Women's Soccer League, the NWSL. We're Angel City ticket holders, huge fans. But most importantly, there are little girls in those stands who can look at those athletes on this just incredible stage and dream. So you had asked about kind of the progression once you get out of college, and can you play club? So you can play in an open league, very competitive open league. So that's the NWSL by way of example. You can get drafted into the pro league, NWSL. So definitely super competitive places to play. As we get older, however, you start having the opportunity to, maybe you don't quite compete at that level, but you play in the over 30s or you play over 40s. We have an over 50s team. We have an over 60s team, over 65s. And it is this unbelievable community of women that support each other, have played with and against each other for years and years. So I get to go back and play with some of my college teammates. So for instance, Cynthia Davis and I played for 4 years at Cal as two center midfielders together, and I get to play with her in our over 60s team. So it's just, it's priceless. It's awesome. This is one of these examples. We have a community of women that live in Hawaii, Southern Cal, Northern Cal, a few ringers here and there from places like Colorado. But this is the Veterans Cup. It was in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I think this was over 40s, maybe, at the time. We win these tournaments a lot. I'm just going to brag. Us just having some fun in North Carolina afterwards. Might involve a beer, too. We have a girlfriend, Kathy Carey, who coached at the University of Hawaii for some time. And we go to visit her and play in a tournament at the University of Hawaii. It's just 7v7, but this is us after one of the tournaments, just a ton of fun. This is my Hall of Fame induction at Cal. These are all women that I grew up playing with. So Catherine and Leslie, Anne, for instance, we all played on Ajax together and grew up playing in Palos Verdes. I just put this in there because Fram is, it's men's and women's teams, but this is my husband, John, his son, Brian, who plays for one of the younger guys' teams, et cetera. And we're at watching a World Cup game, the bar. This is us up at Nansen with our granddaughter, Roxy. This is really fun. So many of us will go to the Women's World Cups if this happens to be in France. And we just met a bunch of my Cal alums, but also a bunch of Ajax players, et cetera. Get together with them there. These are some of my over 50s and 60s. This is a service, celebration of life for someone by the name of Luke Hoffman, who was the manager of Ajax for many, many years. And Ajax probably would not have been around without him and another gentleman who started it by Fred Van Soest. Both of them lived in Manhattan Beach. So we're at his service, and I'll just brag on two of these women. So Jenny Grosso was the first, and I think maybe only, women's SWAT member in Los Angeles. She is a badass. So proud of her. And Monica is a battalion chief in the Port of Los Angeles, which is one of the biggest jobs you can have in LA Fire. So we just have some women who have gone on to do amazing things. This is our fun here at home. And I failed to put it on here, but there's another really fun photo of a huge group of us in New Zealand, where we all got together in a bar before the US-Holland game. And then we were part of a huge march, which this kind of thing happens with the Women's World Cup, also did the same thing in France, where basically the governing body will arrange for the US to march from, half a mile away to the game, and we're singing songs and we're waving flags and we've got face paint. And it is just the most amazing, fun experience. And we're not playing. We're there to support the team, but it is this community that is so bonded around the sport that we fly around the world to go watch the U.S. women play. So it is just a really special sport and community. And I think Shelley was saying something like, her life is just so much richer because of it. Well said. I would say keep the joy of the sport, because sometimes it can feel a little bit like a business, and the pressure is different than when we were growing up. We played it entirely because we loved it. It wasn't pressure coming at us from any angle. In fact, we had to work to play. Like, we had to finance our own trips. It was a big effort. And it's just such a fabulous game, and you will have friends that last a lifetime, like going to the World Cup together and those types of things. So I would say keep the joy, cherish the companionship, the camaraderie, the friendship. And this is very practical. Do cross-train and take care of your body, because it's a rough sport. And it's just good to be really smart about how you treat your body, and maybe don't do what we did and just play through anything, because it comes back to you in the form of knee replacements and things like that. But yeah, just cherish the sport and the beauty of it. The Palos Verdes Breakers were my jump from AYSO to sort of an all-star / club team. And I keep in touch with most of these women. And this is when we were just wrapping as a team, but we just won what was really one of the first Western regional playoffs. And this team was born from two guys, Bill Merrill and Warren Stevenson. And Bill Merrill, who lived in Palos Verdes, his daughter Vicki Merrill also played. He just basically loved girls soccer, and he not only created this youth club team, but then he went on to coach many of us in high school, and then he actually came up and coached us at Cal. And that's when we went to the Final Four and we got varsity status, because he put his shoulder behind that program like nobody's business. So he is loved and adored in the soccer community. And it was guys like him and, women like Jan Smisek, who were role models and who helped the sport take the next step. I would just do a shout out to the investors who have, put their shoulder behind the NWSL. Michelle Kang, Willow Bay, who's invested, heavily in Angel City FC. It is, using Julie Foudy's terms, women turning and pulling others up. And I can't say thank you enough.